Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Ann Sparacco. Today, we're discussing mental health in the workplace and the evolution of related employee benefits over the past decade. And here to talk to us about this topic is Kathryn Mayer, Senior Specialist of B2C Content here at SHRM, as well as one of our subject matter experts who lends her insights on thought leadership content for SHRM.org and other publications such as HR Quarterly. Kathryn, welcome to All Things Work.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. We know we're going to dive into how the past decade has evolved and also looking into the future a little bit on these needs of the workforce and the related benefits. But first, let's dive into your background a little bit. What drew you to this field and, what made you so passionate about it?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that I'm not going to admit that this was purposeful, at least at the beginning. I am a journalist and I was always interested in business journalism. So I knew I wanted to go that route. And I think it was 2011, I started working for a specific business media company. And my role was at a benefits magazine. And initially I thought, okay, what exactly is this going to be? I was very new, obviously, to the field. And it was interesting because it actually wasn't from the HR realm. The employee benefits was actually from the broker consultant side. So it was a little complicated at first, especially you were kind of really thrown into the wolves there. But it made me obviously just pick up the field. And this was also, again, this was 2011. So this was right around the time of Obamacare. So it was very interesting to see exactly what was going on with the Affordable Care Act, how that was impacting employee benefits. So employee benefits were really top of mind for a ton of organizations. And it was an exciting time to be covering employee benefits. And then I kind of shifted a little bit and later I started to cover the HR side of it. So what organizations were doing with employee benefits and total rewards packages. So all things compensation, all things benefits. And yeah, I mean, that was kind of my field, my bread and butter. Two things I think that are so fascinating to me about employee benefits. One is the fact that employee benefits shift so remarkably with what is going on in the world. So, you see things like COVID and high inflation. And if things are going really well in the economy, then employers are really enhancing benefits. They're adding really cool benefits to retain and attract. And conversely, if things are not going as great, then employers sometimes are pulling back on benefits. Maybe they're raising premiums or deductibles. So I think that's one of the most interesting things about employee benefits in my mind. And I think the biggest thing is just how important employee benefits are.
It touches not just all people, but all industries,
Yeah,
everybody involved, and everybody can relate to this. So,
exactly.
and as a journalist of several years myself, I really relate to, the passion of just kind of just focusing on that one subject and really diving deep into that and seeing how it impacts the average individual worker. I think that, is something I focused on is just in my work is how is this story impacting, the everyday person who's going to read this content. So the content you create here at Sherman is phenomenal. We love reading it. So would love to kind of talk about from what you observed and experienced in the past, decade and a half, as you mentioned in your experience. What are some of the key differences we've seen in the benefits around employee mental health from how programs have changed now that it's become more of an open and broader discussion on mental health than it has been in past decades?
Yeah, and I love this topic because there's been such an evolution in mental health care and mental health benefits. It's been, I think part of the evolution has been the employees themselves. There's been an increased amount of expectations from employees and an openness as well. And I think a lot of that is driven by probably younger workers coming into the field and they had grown up kind of talking about some of these mental health issues, talking about, hey, I want support. Here's what I'm going through. And then their expectations are then kind of changing how employers are looking at this. And so as a result, we've certainly seen a big uptick in mental health benefits over the years, certainly from when I started to where we are now. I think back then it was certainly a nice to have. I know this is kind of a cliche by now to say, but I think it was a nice to have, and now it certainly is that must
A
have
must-have.
benefit. It really is, and it's been one of those things too that has reshaped basically all benefit strategies. One of the other interesting things that I have noticed in my reporting is basically everyone I speak to, every HR leader, every company leader, every consultant, everyone, I swear, brings up mental health in some shape, way, or form, even when the conversation has nothing to do with mental health. This comes up. They say, this is a way to support our employees' mental health. That is always such a priority. And so, even if we are talking about a benefit, say caregiving or childcare benefits or financial benefits, and taking in at some of that financial stress that has been sky high, that is now tying back to mental health. So in my mind, one of the most interesting evolutions that I'm seeing in the mental health space is now that everything is kind of a mental health benefit in a way.
It is. It is. It's so funny you even brought that up because we had recent caregiving research that just released,
Mhm.
and our studies found that certain people in states that maybe didn't have a lot of support in caregiving through workplaces, they reported more burnout, feeling extreme stress, anxiety. So that was just some interesting data, just to connect even just one topic that pulls in that mental health
Oh,
aspect.
absolutely, absolutely.
And you touched on how the conversation has opened up more over the past decade, which it's been very clear, and it's so wonderful to see. But what are some other of those key turning points you think have occurred that really changed the path to the way companies approach assisting with mental health?
Yeah, I would say again the influx I think of newer employees. I mentioned that, but I mean we can't have this conversation without discussing obviously the onset of COVID and what that did. So, like everything else, the pandemic certainly exacerbated where we are with some of these supports and some of these focuses from organizations. At the time, I think at the onset it was very clear that this was taking a toll on mental health. Obviously, our physical health was threatened, financial health was threatened. People were very anxious about childcare and job security and so much. So, from a very early point in the pandemic, organizations did add and enhance mental health benefits, and they also kind of opened up a bit more of that culture of support and openness, and again, talking to peers, I'm a manager, I'm gonna talk to my employees and say, "How are you doing? Like, what can I help you with? Are you doing okay?" And that just really blew everything up, and things didn't change from that, and I think that's a very, very good thing.
So here at SHRM, we have a lot of research, and a recent mental health series research was released last May in 2024, and it found there was quite a split on how people felt when it came to how their job was impacting their mental health. 35% that say that their job had a negative impact on their mental health versus 34% had a positive impact. So, like we said, we're really seeing that split. People are clearly having very different experiences within their organizations. So, what does this actually reveal about the current state of workplace benefits around well being?
I think it really just again, like, the split that you're saying just shows us how different experiences can be and what an impact the workplace can make. Because I think sometimes people assume maybe that, okay, well, I could see how the job could negatively affect in mental health, but maybe some people aren't thinking about, hey, but actually, there are a lot of positives there. And time again, research and anecdotal research and everything else really shows us the same thing that if the employee feels cared about and if they feel like they're getting support, and if they feel like their manager really cares about them and cares about their well-being, then they feel better about themselves, they feel better about their mental health, and they feel better about the job. And I think that it's such a simple notion, but it really can make such a difference. Things like small check-ins could make a difference. Just, how are you doing? How are things going? How can I support you? And making sure that you have the benefits in place, I think make such a big difference. And I think that if you're seeing research like that, you could just see the difference it can make. So I would encourage employers to actually do ask employees how they feel about figures like that, and pay attention to some of those trends because it's so important.
And like we said, it impacts so much impacts mental health. And
Yeah,
then you got the reverse part. Your mental health impacts so much of what you do and how
it
you
sure
work and your
does. Yeah.
productivity. What are some of the most innovative or impactful mental health initiatives you've seen companies, implement more recently, let's say?
Absolutely. I think first I will mention that I think it's really important to have a handful as well and to just not make sure like it's not just an EAP, for instance, but to have a number of things in place as well so that you can impact employees and further that impact for who's getting help and when. There's one initiative that I will mention that I think is really neat, a new kind of mental health benefit is the idea of a company-wide break. Now, this is not I wouldn't say this is, you know, this crazy trend that we're seeing a ton of organizations do, and obviously not a lot are not able to do this, but there are a handful of organizations that are actually closing down, and basically giving all employees a break at the same time. And this is in addition to, say, their pay time off policies. But for instance, a big consulting firm closes down their offices for 1 week in the summertime and then at the holidays end of year. And what they say when I spoke to them, what they said that this does is encourage their employees' mental health because what they were realizing was that employees would go take a vacation or whatnot. But they would still be constantly worried about their job. They would constantly be connected. So say I'm trying to enjoy some time in Hawaii, but I'm continually getting emails and Joe is slacking me and I'm feeling guilty because he's kind of carrying the workload. So what they did is they said, okay, let's kind of close down operations for as much as we can. Obviously, some people that keep things moving a little bit. And they said that has had a huge impact on employees' mental health. And while that is obviously a big initiative, there are and not necessarily something I think that's going to be this crazy benefit that's going to be implemented at a ton of companies. It is worth noting that that is something that they came up with after talking to their employees and figuring out some of their pain points. So it's about being creative with a lot of ideas and knowing your own workforce. But I think that's a really interesting and unique benefit.
Oh, that's a great example. And like you said, not every company would be able to afford
Right.
to do that. We get that. But like you said, just trying to be more innovative based on the feedback that you're getting, give it
Exactly.
about surveys, so, technology plays a huge role in this as well. We know teletherapy exists. We download those apps. I got at least one of them on my phone right now. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
it's Headspace, and then there's Calm. There's all the ones. That we won't advertise too much, but there's all these AI tools that can really help out, or just ways to communicate better. So how are companies effectively using these tools, and do you see any potential risks that people should be aware of when it comes to this? Because like we say at SHRM, AI plus HI, you always have
Right.
to bring in that human aspect when leveraging AI.
Absolutely. We are certainly seeing technology play a big role, and that has been happening certainly in the benefits realm, specifically, of course, mental health benefits, but also just benefits at large as well. And I think you're right, mental health apps are a huge part of that, and teletherapy as well. I think I mean, I think the biggest advantage, I'll start by saying that the advantage to some of this technology at play, including AI, but it's giving people more accessibility. And that is so important with healthcare because if you're going through something, I don't want to wait weeks necessarily to see someone. And, you want help when you want it, when you need it. And the other thing is if I'm a full-time employee, so I'm constantly, trying to get my work done. And so sometimes, maybe scheduling appointments during the day is kind of difficult, or maybe someone has, their childcare at night or other priorities and they can't get into certain appointments, after hours. So that's another big advantage of some of these apps. The technology is giving, again, helping employees get care, at a lot of different times. But I think you're right, of course, that employers do have to be cognizant of some of those risks. Certainly, privacy is one of those. That is kind of that always it always is the case, especially with health information. But when things are online and on these apps, I think that is one thing that employers really kind of have to pay attention a little bit to, and make sure that they're ensuring some of this privacy um, is ensured. And then the other thing, of course, you mentioned SHRM's initiatives with AI, but you have to have that human touch. So while the technology is really important and really great, you can't put all of your eggs in one basket. It cannot just be mental health technology. You have to have that human aspect, and a lot of that human aspect is that culture that you're ensuring in the place too. But yeah, so don't forget the human touch.
Previous SHRM research found nearly half of US employees, they have those higher expectations of the level of mental health support they would like to receive at their organization, and compared to last year. So the expectation for improved resources and initiatives, has really grown amongst employees. But not every company has that beautiful budget like major corporations like Google or Starbucks where they can meet a lot of those needs. Granted, they're also meeting a lot more workers' needs
Yeah.
because their workforce is much larger. But what are some, let's go to the budget side. What are some cost effective ways or approaches small and medium sized businesses, because we know a lot of them are sure members, can support employee mental health?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and really important to pay attention to. I think a lot of yeah, because I think a lot of organizations are worried about, oh my gosh, those shiny big benefits, but of course there's a lot of money that goes into them. So I think my first piece of advice would be to take stock of what you have, because I think a lot of organizations do have something in play. Most organizations have an EAP. The vast majority do, or a lot of organizations also have something maybe tied into their health plan. And then like we were talking about before, is maybe you have caregiving support, maybe you have flexible schedules. What kind of benefits too do you offer that do help or can help employees' mental health? I think I would start there. And then the second thing I would say is there are a lot of low cost and no cost things that organizations can do. I think one of the things, I mean, you could do things like webinars. You could partner with certain organizations, nonprofits that like to promote this topic that would be at no cost. You probably have a lot of different employees or experts in your organization that could speak to a lot of these topics. Don't think about some of their expertise. And there's a lot of also resources, say there's hotlines and there's free resources. There's a lot of free mental health apps as well. And organizations can certainly tout some of those as well, because I think that some of the problems, or sometimes a lot of people don't know where to start. Employees don't know where to start with some of these resources. There's a lot of kind of inertia and, confusion about it. And so even if employers say, here are 5 free resources that you could take advantage of today, I think that would be a really, really big help. And then, of course, the other is just ensuring that you have that culture and make sure that mental health is something that you continually discuss and that you prioritize. And I think that is certainly that doesn't cost anything, but that does cost you if you don't do it.
Exactly. It's just gonna cost you more if you don't put these initiatives in first, even in a costly way. So I loved those, very concrete ways to be effective and innovative in helping your employees. Really, really helpful. And so, look, the brain is very complex. Us trying to even understand our own mental health is already a challenge in itself, trying to understand emotions and why our mental capacity might be, overloaded. So measuring just people's impact, within an organization, it's hard. It can be challenging to measure, but it's possible. So, what are some metrics or indicators HR professionals should really focus on to evaluate the impact of their initiatives?
Yeah, it's so important. I think utilization rates, I mean, especially if you're talking specifically too about some of these benefits, especially mental health benefits, are employees using them? I think is one place to start, of course. But because communication is kind of a big problem, and a lot of employees are not necessarily aware of some of these benefits, I would also before I would recommend saying like sunset some kind of a benefit if the utilization rates are low is just also, are employees aware that some of these initiatives exist? I think that's a really big one. And then I mean, you just gotta talk to employees. I know that is so simple and trite, but that's what you have to do. You really just have to continually talk and survey employees. And I think a lot of employers oftentimes think about like that big bad annual survey. And a lot of workers are like, oh my gosh, here it comes. It's, 60 questions, 100 questions. Maybe just get like 5 questions on a specific employee, how they're feeling about their mental health. How are they feeling about specific benefits? And try to get a pulse that way.
I like that. I like that a lot. Especially because, especially if it's an anonymous survey, people might feel a little more, able to be vulnerable. Uh,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's how I feel naturally.
Right, yeah,
um,
same.
so we talked a lot about the past decade. I would love to touch on the future a little bit here. So looking ahead, what trends or developments do you see shaping the future of mental health benefits over the next 5 to 10 years, let's say?
I think I would expect that preventive, mental health is going to be a bigger issue, just as we talk about things like the importance of getting mammograms and the importance of getting colonoscopies. You don't want to wait until things get to be at a bad level. You want to be proactive about some of this, and I think there's going to be more attention on things like stress reduction, checking in with employees, looking at burnout risk and burnout rates before things get to maybe, you know, a much unhealthier level. I think that's gonna be a really big trend to watch, and I know we briefly had mentioned mental health training. I think that's gonna be a really big initiative because we are trying to create kind of a culture of mental health in the workplace, but you need to have the right pieces in play here. And you need to train managers, you need to train HR company leaders, you need to train just basically everyone on what to look for exactly. How it is what signs is someone kind of in duress? What should we be looking for here and how can we best help? And I think that's going to be another trend certainly we're gonna watch in the next several years.
Yeah, it's not just the initiatives or the programs or the budgeting. It really
Yeah,
is at the end of the day just kind of opening your mind a little bit more and tuning in to other people, just other people in general. I love it.
absolutely.
And so would love to leave with this thought for, our audience listening to all this, it's such wonderful concrete advice. And I think of what a lot of people might be thinking is, oh gosh, okay, now I got to think of all of this in addition to all these other initiatives I'm trying to, just balance it all. And it can be overwhelming. So, what would you say to those who may feel overwhelmed? Possibly not because of this discussion, but because the topic can be overwhelming. on where to start when it comes to considering and implementing mental health benefits.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many competing priorities, right? I think that is so I think for a lot of HR and company leaders, they're thinking, "Oh my gosh," like you said, "Wow, this is another thing I have to worry about." But so my advice is not not overthinking this. Basically, do something because I think if you're in this mode of, "Oh my gosh, do I do mental health benefit A or mental health benefit B, and you're weighing the pros and cons, I think you're gonna get completely overwhelmed. And I think what the data really shows is that if you have something in play, I think you can make a huge impact for your employees. So, lean into something. I don't think you're gonna make the wrong decision. If you have anything that could help support employees' mental health, it is a good thing. And maybe I might benefit from in-person therapy, but you might benefit from a mental health app. You don't know which one, you know, employees are obviously different creatures and we don't know exactly what's going to be the best for them, but ultimately you're probably going to help someone and that's the bottom line. So I would just do something, start small, and then you keep adding from there. But don't be afraid to try something. I think it's gonna be for the best.
Any final thoughts for our audience, especially looking forward to the future as mental health becomes an even bigger discussion?
I one more piece of advice I would say is make sure you're communicating. When we talk about so many of these resources, these employee benefits, time and time again, employees are not aware of the benefits. They don't know what they have offered at their organization and they don't know how to use them. So make sure to regularly communicate about this. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, or say the election was stressful for people, or something is stressful in the time in your community, in your workplace. Maybe a lot of people are very stressed out because you have a high workload right now. Make sure to use some of those points and say, I know this could be a stressful time. Here's a reminder. Here are some benefits that we have available for you, and here's exactly how to use them. Do not let a good mental health benefit or a good mental health initiative go to waste.
I love that. I love that. And thank you so much, Catherine. We really appreciate your insight, your concrete advice on your decade and a half experience, on this topic, and looking forward to the future. Really, it was insightful and wonderful to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always love talking, certainly about employee benefits and specifically mental health, of course, because it's such a vital, vital topic.
Vital topic indeed. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of All Things Work. Just head to shrm.org/allthingswork where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can also follow us on social media, like, comment, share. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
SHRM.